Hey, friends. Well, I listened to the end of Sadhguru's book, Inner Engineering, yesterday. So obviously, that's what I'm going to talk about. anytime I anytime I spend any time uh, imbibing that level of wisdom, I feel like I just kind of start bubbling over with not just recognition of it, but then further insights. It's like it sparks these fireworks of insight. And the end of his book is gorgeous, really kind of um, amazing. And one of the things he talks about, this is what really kind of struck me. He talks about how the world right now, if we look at the world, it ought to be a paradise. We have everything we could possibly need. And we're on the verge of so much more. When you look at just the technological power of our age, it's staggering. To know the human history of like evolution and cultural evolution and early man and tool building and then to observe where we are today, it's mind-bendingly abundant where we are now and how we live now. And I've had this thought, like every time I walk into a Whole Foods, I'm like, we've reached peak civilization. What else? What else could a supermarket offer human beings? What else? We made it. We're there. Now I say that somewhat tongue in cheek because I know that obviously we have a lot of problems. And obviously a lot of the technological means that we have at our disposal right now are being misused and sometimes abused in service of ends that don't feel like paradise, that don't feel like the culmination of human consciousness. But what Sadhguru says really beautifully at the end of his book is we have everything. The one thing that's missing is human consciousness. And that sounds about right to me. The one thing missing is human consciousness. Because all of the means we have, all of the development on the technological front and educationally and on the terms of modern medicine and just, a lot of it boils down to technology, all these different domains of life that have been just improved to a point where people whom we would not consider privileged live at a standard of living that's beyond the royalty in days in just a couple hundred years ago. And so this sense that's like we're living in paradise, but we can't experience the paradise of it. And that's the really kind of sad aspect to all this. Because here we are with everything. Abundance. The notion of abundance is almost like a worn out term when you look at our situation today. Our lives are so abundant. They're overabundant. And this is another thing that Sadhguru points out is, a lot of people, some people are suffering their failure in life, but many, many, many people are suffering their success. Some people are suffering their bondage, but many, many, many people are suffering their freedom. And that's when I think about my predicament, the predicament of people who have the level of, privilege that I've had, and access and education, and we can only be suffering our freedom because the opportunities we experience are beyond the wildest dreams of essentially anyone living just a few generations ago. So, and that experience of suffering our freedom is kind of humbling. Because it means we have everything we could possibly want. And when we're suffering our freedom, the only thing missing is consciousness. The only thing that creates suffering out of freedom is compulsiveness. It's when there's infinite opportunity, there's essentially boundless liberty, but we don't experience the boundlessness of that liberty. We don't experience the infinite opportunity because our pattern is compulsive. So we stay locked in a cycle of dissatisfaction, a cycle of scarcity, a cycle of frustration or negativity. And I find it really, really just eye-opening to recognize that fact. And because I have these moments, I have these glimpses where, well, I have more, it's really more than just moments. I would say I have periods of time where that weight falls away, the weight of compulsion falls away, and all of a sudden it's like the world is my oyster. The world is our oyster. It's like the lid comes off and it's raining amazingness. But it's the cycles of compulsion, and especially among those of us who suffer our freedom, at least when we're suffering our bondage, there's a certain sense that it's not our fault. But when we're suffering our freedom, it's really kind of the case that our suffering is entirely self-imposed. And breaking out of that suffering is a matter of turning inward. It's a matter of looking in and saying, who am I? What is my consciousness? What am I going to do with this infinite liberty, this infinite potential? This really strikes me. It really strikes me sometimes because, we've all heard these statistics about how easy it would be to provide food for everyone in the world, how easy it would be to provide X, kinds of resources for everybody in the world. Human consciousness could solve the problems of the world like that. I mean, overnight, we could make decisions that would change everything. I'm not saying there aren't entrenched interests or that nobody would be against that. That's obviously the issue. But if we imagine human ingenuity, human consciousness, the capacity of human consciousness to transcend cyclical compulsive behavior and make choices on behalf of a greater perspective, what problem couldn't we solve? Now, I know it's not that simple, but it's good to remember that on some level, it is that simple. On some level, it is. I think we don't do ourselves a service by insisting that it's more complicated because the truth is, all that selfish behavior, all the things we lament about the way the world is, they come down to compulsive behavior. They're traceable to compulsive behavior on the part of individuals or groups or entire, large groups, institutions. They all come down to that, to the kind of compulsive nature of the compulsive and therefore cyclical, endlessly rehashing the same old behavior in ever new ways, but those new ways are still serving the compulsiveness. That's the rub. So I don't know where I'm going with this. I think what shows up for me as I acknowledge this and as I kind of receive the emotional truth of this is that I feel immediately energized to make my life about human consciousness, starting with my own and hopefully rippling out and helping other people also go on this journey. That's the thing that shifts everything else. We have everything we could possibly need. You just gotta get a little conscious. So, yeah. That's where this fine Saturday morning has taken me. I feel like there's a lot more, so stay tuned for another post. It's kind of like this one. Thanks for watching, folks. Appreciate you. All the love in the world. Have a great day. I'll see you soon.